Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Ravnica Legion spoilers. And I'm excited. I'm feeling better from my cold for the most part, like 90% over it at this point after taking a couple nights off, and I am super hyped to talk about these new cards. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about today, some mythics, some rares, some powerful lower rarity stuff, so we should probably jump right into it and start talking about some sweet new cards. Before we do, a quick reminder, if you haven't already, it would be so sweet of you if you could take a second, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's jump into it, starting with a mythic, Rakdos the Showstopper. And this card, it really is a showstopper. For 6 mana in the Rakdos colors, you get a 6/6 with flying and trample. It's a legendary demon, and when it enters the battlefield, you flip a coin for each creature that isn't a demon, a devil, or an imp, and destroy each creature whose coin comes up tails. So basically, you have a 50% chance of destroying all the non-demon, devil, or imp creatures on the battlefield when it comes into play, which means if you're playing a deck with a bunch of demons, this can kind of be like a pseudo wrath effect. I mean, there's randomness, and there's a lot of randomness, and I don't know, this kind of feels like a card that's designed for Magic Arena to have these big, flashy, high variance moments, but really, this is a powerful card. A 6 mana 6/6 flying trample is already good, and the ability, if you can play a lot of demons, is all upside. And one of the reasons I'm excited for Rakdos the Showstopper is thanks to it and some of our new additions from Ravnica Allegiance, we actually have a really solid demon curve. In theory, we can play Spawn of Mayhem into Doom Whisper, into Rakdos, into Demon Lord Belsenlock. We might even be able to play like Demon Tribal, which means when Rakdos comes into play, it's not hurting us at all, and we're just like destroying half-ish, random-ish, whatever, of our opponent's creatures, which seems really powerful. So Rakdos, it seems really solid, and that doesn't even include the fact that you could go another direction with this card. This could be your top end of like a Jund control deck. The other way to get around the downside of maybe destroying your own creatures is just not play other creatures. Like, if you're not playing many creatures, you can just win with Planeswalkers, Varaskas, and Karns, and so forth, and then Rakdos is just like a major removal spell plus big flying finisher. So I think this card's super sweet, and that doesn't even include, it's another demon for Liliana's contract. We are slowly getting enough demons that it might actually be a somewhat practical dream to win the game with Liliana's contract, and Rakdos would definitely be a big part of that. So Rakdos, it seems super sweet. It's a good commander, potentially blowing up a bunch of your opponent's stuff, actually giving you a good devil, demon / imp commander, which is pretty sweet. Plus, in standard, it's just massive and has a lot of upside, especially if you build around it a little bit. So, a super sweet Rakdos mythic. Next on our list, oh my god, this card, Prime Speaker Vannifer, which is one of the most powerful cards I think we've seen so far. 4 mana, you get a 2/4. It's an Elf Ooze Wizard. Wizards is just going crazy with the creature types on these Simic cards. It is legendary, but it has an ability where you can sack a creature, and you search for a creature with the sacked creature's converted mana cost +1, put it onto the battlefield, then you shuffle your library. You can only do this anytime you can cast a sorcery. Basically, Prime Speaker Vannifer is a birthing pod, more or less. There's a couple of very small differences. The biggest difference is that Prime Speaker Vannifer is a creature, so it does die to creature removal, but you can do a lot of the same things as you could with Birthing Pod. So for example, let's talk about standard, and the way I see this, you can just play it for value if you want to, if you build your curve around it, but where cards like Prime Speaker Vannifer are at their most powerful is when you're using them to set up combos. Like, that's what got Birthing Pod banned, was being this crazy combo enabler, not just that it was too good as a value piece. So in standard, there's not any super obvious, like, just I win the game combo, but the main plan that I found is to untap Prime Speaker Vannifer with Kekafadon, which is a dinosaur with an enrage trigger that lets you untap target permanent. If you can also have out a Forerunner of the Empire, where whenever a dinosaur enters the battlefield, you get to ping everything, which pings Kekadaphon, which then untaps Prime Speaker of Vannifer, which lets you stack something else to get another creature. If you can throw Bellowing Aegiasaur into this mix, maybe tutor it up with the help of Prime Speaker, then you go infinite, because the problem with the main combo is that Forerunner will eventually kill itself by pinging everything, and it'll take 3 damage, it'll die. But with a Bellowing Aegiasaur out, then you can keep putting counters on everything, so you literally go infinite and can just keep tutoring, and then to finally close out the game, the end of the loop is finding a Polyraptor, and then you just go crazy, because you're going to have these massive Polyraptors, you're going to have everything you could possibly need. Polyraptor goes infinite with Forerunner of the Legion, Bellowing Aegiasaur, you make a million powered Polyraptors, just beat your opponent down. It seems like something that will at very least be a sweet against the odds episode. So that's the best I found for the standard format. As far as modern, there's some pretty easy loops to win the game there as well. Getting like Deceiver Exarch, which then untaps Prime Speaker, into Breaching Hippocamp, which untaps Prime Speaker, into Phantasmal Image, sacking like a Birds of Paradise to get another Breaching Hippocamp to untap Prime Speaker, sack one of the Hippocamps to get a Kiki-Jiki, then you go infinite, making an infinite number of Breaching Hippocamps with Kiki-Jiki. So this is a card that I think has a chance to show up in Modern for sure, and potentially in Standard as well. We'll see if the drawback of being a creature will keep it in check to some extent, and I think it is probably less powerful than Birthing Pod, just because it dies to creature removal, when Birthing Pod dodged a lot of removal by being an artifact, but still, you can definitely build your deck in Modern in specific, and maybe in Standard as well, although it's a little bit janky, where if you untap with Prime Speaker and just another creature or two on the battlefield, you should be able to tutor out a loop that ends with you winning the game right away. So definitely a super powerful option and a super fun commander as well. I love cards like this for commander. Build your toolbox, just tutor your way up, get all kinds of crazy toolboxy stuff. So it seems like a sweet commander too. Next on our list, we have Pestilence Spirit, which is a super unique card. 3 mana in the black color. You get a 3/2 with Menace and Death Touch. The big deal is, it gives instants and sorcery spells you control Death Touch. It's an ability that we've never seen before in Magic, and it can do some pretty powerful things. So in Standard, the easiest combo is you play Pestilence Spirit on turn number 3. Turn number 4, you can Cosmotronic Wave, 1 damage to all of your opponent's creatures, so you just wipe your opponent's board for 4 mana. And it's a one-sided board wipe. You build your own Plague Wind. You can also do some less broken things, but still really powerful things. So for example, if you have a Pestilence Spirit out in your Rakdos deck, a Lava Coil is going to take down a Doom Whisperer. A Shock is going to take down a Doom Whisperer. So it's a way that you can use small red removal / burn spells to take down big creatures that would otherwise be really problematic. And if you go back to older formats, things get even more fun. Gutshot is just free, kill anything. Blazing Volley, Electrickery kind of does the wave trick in Standard, but for even less mana. Like Blazing Volley is 1 mana, just wipe out all your opponent's creatures. So I'm really excited to see what happens with Pestilence Spirit. It has good enough stats on its own that I could see it showing up in decks, and in Standard, I don't know how much you build around it. It seems like you're playing a Rakdos deck, you want to be able to shock bigger things, that's a nice upside there, and then maybe in the right matchup, you can sideboard in those one-sided Plague Winds and just really go to town with Pestilence Spirit. But regardless, one of the more unique cards we've seen in a while. Next on our list, we have End Raise Forerunners, which, it's big, and it has a lot of abilities. 8 mana, get a 7/7 with Vigilance and Trample and Haste, and when it enters the battlefield, all your other creatures get +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So basically, a massive overrun with a big body, and I'm not really sure what to make of this card. It reminds me of Decimator of Provinces, although it's a little bit cheaper without the merge cost. With Decimator, you gotta merge it, but it basically gives you essentially the same type of ability and the same type of body. It's also reminiscent of Craterhoof, but likely not as good as Craterhoof. Part of the power of Craterhoof is all of your creatures typically get like +5/+5, +7/+7, and your opponent's just guaranteed to die. I could imagine situations where you cast an End Raise Forerunners and it's not enough to win the game. So I'm not really sure. Craterhoof was busted. Decimator was basically unplayed. Where does End Raise Forerunners fall on that scale? I'm not really sure. If it's going to work in in Standard, it's going to be in like a creature-based ramp deck. We're using Lana Wars, Druid of the Cowl, cheap ramp creatures like that, flooding the board, maybe of Marsh of the Multitudes or other token producers, and then trust that when you cast this for 8 mana, you just win the game right away. Whether or not that develops into a legit strategy, we'll have to wait and see, but potentially a powerful finisher for go-wide ramp-style green decks. We also got Gutter Bones, which is the next in a long line of like Dreadwander or Bloodsoak Champion, the 2-1 for 1 that somehow comes back from your graveyard. It comes into play tapped. You can pay 1 and a black to return it from your graveyard to your hand. You got to do it during your turn and only if your opponent lost life. So these cards, I mean, 2-1s for 1 that are recursive, typically see play. They show up in whatever, Rakdos aggro, mono black aggro, black X aggro decks. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Gutter Bones, even though it doesn't really have a relevant creature type. Skeleton Warrior doesn't really do a whole lot in Standard. I still wouldn't be surprised to see this end up being heavily played in Black X aggro. The other sweet thing about this card is it gives us another pseudo-resembling skeleton type effect to maybe combo off with Desecrated Tomb. We still have Desecrated Tomb in the format. We know we're getting at least some sacrifice outlets in Ravnica Allegiance, so maybe we can build a like sack your stuff, get it back from the graveyard, make a bunch of bats type of deck with the help of Desecrated Tomb, Gutter Bones, and Resembling Skeleton. So a card that very likely shows up in aggro and might have some combo potential as well. Next on our list, we got a bunch of kind of random rares that I want to mention, but I'm not going to go super deep on. Smothering Tithe is a cool source of ramp for non-green or mono-white, I guess, commander decks. Basically, you get a treasure whenever your opponent draws a card, unless that player pays 2 mana. And in Commander, pretty unlikely your opponents are going to spend their mana paying 2 to keep you from getting a treasure. So in theory, in a 4-player game, you play this and you're getting like 3 treasures every turn, which is actually a lot of ramp, and it triggers on any draw. So if your opponent casts a Sphinx's Revelation or has a Consecrated Sphinx, the amount of treasures you're going to get is going to be pretty overwhelming. So I think this is a good ramp card for commander decks that don't necessarily have access to the best ramp in the format, like green decks, which already have tons of great ways to ramp. If you're playing mono white though, this could be a great option for ramping in a deck like that. Rampage of the Clans is a pretty silly card. 4 mana, instant speed. It destroys all artifacts and enchantments, but for each permanent destroyed that way, its controller gets a 3/3 green centaur creature token. So as Artifact A, I think this card is kind of meh. Like, I don't think you want to play this in Modern against Affinity. Like, sure, you blow up other Ornithopters, but you give them 3/3s instead. That doesn't seem like a great deal, a great way to get rid of that cranial plating or whatever. It's probably fine in Commander for that purpose. However, what I really want to do with this card is combo off with it in Standard with treasure tokens. If you could play a deck that's just like spell swindling and wily goblining and making a bunch of treasures and having them sit on the battlefield, then at instant speed at the end of your opponent's turn, you just cast this, upgrade like 5 or 10 treasures into 3/3s, and kill your opponent out of nowhere. So it's weird as a hate card, but I like it as like a janky combo piece for treasure decks. Growth Chamber Guardian, another sweet creature type. Elf Crab Warrior, and it's basically like this weird green Squadron Hawk. So 2 mana, get a 2/2, so it's a bear. You can adapt it for 3 mana to put 2 counters on it, but whenever 1 or more counters are placed on it, you can search your library for a card with the same name. So basically you can adapt it for 3 mana, get another Growth Chamber Guardian. The other thing worth mentioning is it triggers whenever a counter is placed on it. So in theory, you can put a counter on it with an instant, a sorcery, whatever, and still tutor out more. So this might work like a weird ground grizzly bear style Squadron Hawk. Just how good it is remains to be seen. There's a lot of competition in the green 2-drop slot, but it is a cool option to have in a unique card. Finally, Guardian Project is pretty sweet. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you don't have a creature with the same name on the battlefield or in your graveyard, you get to draw a card. So the first thing that this makes me think of is Commander, for one, because you're playing all Singleton. Also Singleton on Magic Arena. It seems like a great card draw engine in formats where you're only playing one of everything anyway. So that's where it really shines. In normal formats where you're playing 4 of a card, it's a little bit awkward. Also worth mentioning, it is a combo piece. Remember, this is whenever a creature enters the battlefield. So in theory, let's say you have a zombie out, you have a Gravecrawler, you have a Phyrexian Altar, you sacrifice Gravecrawler, get a black mana, recast it from your graveyard for that black black mana, trigger Guardian Project, you basically just draw your entire deck. So there's definitely some combo loops where this allows you to go infinite, draw your entire deck for a pretty cheap price. So keep an eye out for this as a potential combo piece in formats like Commander as well, where you have a lot of options for kind of going infinite with this card. Otherwise, we got a bunch of lower rarity stuff that's worth talking about. We got two more of the XXYY uncommon cycle. Basilica Bellhaunt is pretty interesting. 4 mana in the all resolve colors. You get a 3/4, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card, you gain 3 life. And then Frilled Mystic, 2 green, 2 blue for a 3/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, you get to counter target spell. Probably the easiest comparisons for these cards is Basilica Bellhaunt is the Orzhov Siege Rhino. Obviously a little bit different. You don't actually damage your opponent. Instead, you make them draw a card. But there are some similarities there. Plus, it's a spirit, which could be a relevant creature type. And then Frilled Mystic. This is one of my favorite cards we've seen from the set. I love me some Mystic Snake. And Frilled Mystic is basically a strict upgrade. Yes, the mana's slightly worse. It's not a snake, if that's a thing, but you get a better body and you still get the same ability. So I am super excited to see what Frilled Mystic, our elf lizard wizard, which one of the best creature types to say, lizard wizard, how do you beat that, can do in standard. Otherwise, we got a ton of split cards to talk about. I think the one I'm most excited for is probably Depose Deploy. The front half, 2 mana in blue or white hybrid, lets you tap a creature, draw a card, so it cycles pretty easily, maybe prevents some damage. Then the back half, for 4 mana instant speed, gives you 2 Thopters with flying, and you gain a life for each creature you control. Could be a pretty sweet option for a Thopter/token deck. The Rakdos split card, Carnage is the most interesting point. It's basically a Blightning that costs 1 more mana, but Blightning was one of the best cards in a standard format. And then as for the Orzhov member of the cycle, I mean, it's fine. Graveyard Hate with cantripping, it's a good way to get rid of like an Arclight Phoenix. The back half gives you like an expensive Edict effect, but it does hit a big creature and it does gain you some life. So these cards could show up in their colors in standard. Continuing with the sweet commons and uncommons, Crenarium's Bellowing, super sweet sweeper, Zurtar Goblin, potentially a powerful early game threat. Crenarium's Bellowing, basically an upgraded Golden Demise for the most part. Golden Demise upside is sometimes you don't hit your creatures. The upside of Crenarium's Bellowing is it exiles the stuff it kills. So if you're tired of losing to Arclight Phoenixes, this is a really good option, especially if you're playing big stuff that isn't going to die to Bellowing anyway. And then Zurtar Goblin, a 2/2 for 2 with Riot, so you can have a 2/2 haste for 2, which isn't bad, or you can have a Watch Wolf, which isn't bad either. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this sneak into Gruul aggro decks in standard. Pitiless Pontiff is a card that is good, but I'm still a little bit disappointed about. So 2 mana, you get a 2/2. You can pay 1 to sack a creature. It gains Death Touch and Indestructible until end of turn. So this is a fine card. It is a reasonable sacrifice outlet, but I hope it's not replacing a free sacrifice outlet. We really need a free sacrifice outlet to make Aristocrats work, but this card still can have a place in the Aristocrats deck with Alendas and Poison Tip Archers and stuff like Conclave Cavalier that can be sacrificed for value to drain your opponent out of the game. Plus we got Tisa to double up on the death triggers with Open the Graves and Judas. So this is definitely a part of the Aristocrats deck, although I'm still holding out hope for that free sacrifice outlet to really push the deck over the top. Otherwise, High Alert is a card that I am unreasonably excited for. 3 mana enchantment makes it so each of your creature deals combat damage equal to their toughness rather than their powers. More importantly, creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have defender, can also untap a creature. That's not that important. The big deal here is this is the card that Arcades needs to function in standard. Arcades is one of the cards I wanted to work most in standard because it's so sweet. It draws so many cards. It's like the most unique of the new Elder Dragons. The problem is Arcades decks, they have the Heartless Summoning problem, where if you have Arcades and it sticks on the battlefield, your deck is absurd. But when you don't have Arcades, your deck just does nothing. You're playing a bunch of walls. Well, High Alert now gives us 8 Arcades, and High Alert is an Arcades that doesn't die to creature removal. Yes, it doesn't give us the same card advantage, but it is still a great backup Arcades, and I think it might make the wall deck actually legit. We have a ton of cheap walls that are insane when you have a High Alert, like Portcullis is fine, Wall of Vines. These are wild Nakatos with upside, 1 mana 3/3s with High Alert or Arcades out. Wall of Mist, it's a 5/5 for 2. It's massive. So we have a ton of awesome walls to play with this, and I think that having 8 Arcades might make the deck a legitimate option for standard. Anyway, That brings us to the end of our daily spoilers for today. So let me know what you think. How good are these cards? Is Rakdos going to be a standard staple? Can demons work with Liliana's contract? What about Prime Speaker Vannifer? What other birthing pod-esque loops are there that we can pull off? How about Pestilence Spirit? Is that just a sweet, unique card, or can it actually see play? End Raise Forerunners. Is that more Craterhoof or more Decimator of Provinces? What about Gutterbones? All the other random rares. Rampage of the Clans for the Treasure Deck, Growth Chamber Guardian, Guardian Project, all that kind of stuff. The lower rarity stuff, the split cards. Can High Alert make Arcades work? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.